Welcome to Courageous Conviction. Remember that Jeff and I record each Saturday 5 episodes. So please hit the like button, subscribe so you catch all 5 episodes. We usually start out with one theme or topic. We have to go down a lot of rabbit holes to really understand it. Some things are more sensitive than others right now, what's going on in the world. So hit the like button, subscribe, and let's jump into this video.
The rich, and the people that are oppressing them. But the problem is that the poor man goes out and fights against the rich and makes the socialist man, like the Che Guevaras and the Fidel Castros, rich. And nothing changes. If anything changes, it becomes worse for the poor man. And that's what happens with socialism. Socialism doesn't bring about wealth for the whole community. It just, makes another guy rich and turns them into a bad guy if they weren't bad already.
Well, let me tell you what I witnessed in Nicaragua is just prior to elections, Ortega goes out with his team and they go to all the poor and they give away chickens and cows and stuff like that, right? Just for the elections. And that's how they get their vote. They're buying votes. That's how they get their vote, right? And so they keep themselves in power as they buy votes by giving, but they don't progress. They don't get better. The water's still bad. I think you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I bet you if you look it up, the average life expectancy in Nicaragua would be much lower, I think, than the rest of the world, or at least first worlds, right? It's going to be much, much lower. The water, the government does not fix the water. And I know, family, my wife's side, that have lost many people to liver diseases because of water in their 40s. A lot of them die in their 40s. Right?
Well, that's it. It's corruption. It's corruption at its best. There's corruption, in our country right now, but we've got all these young, young people that are looking for Marxism as being the answer, and we're just kind of following the trends of Latin America that it never worked for them, and it still is never going to work for them. People say, hey, Chavez was great, but he died. Like, well, no, he's not great. He did die, and his legacy was carried on, and it's still a crappy country. It was a good country once before, certainly a lot better than what it is now, but it's a very dangerous country to live in. There's a reason people leave and flee that country. Socialism doesn't work. The signs of socialism have always been destructive.
Well, you know what I think we should do, and I like what you're talking about with the tithing idea. The tithing and the giving of the 10%. One thing I learned with the 10% was that it helped me. Look, all this is all predicated on discipline. Our whole life is based off discipline. Are we going to be obedient to the commandments? Are we going to be obedient to modern day revelation, right? And even are we going to be obedient to the spirit that's within us, that's guiding us inside? And I heard on Quick Radio the other day, there was a guest on, and he said that, Greg, he said, I don't say that I follow the prophet. I do follow the prophet, but I follow Jesus Christ. Right. And the prophet is a voice put here on this earth. And I follow Jesus Christ, and I have to have my own witnesses as well on things. I had to seek out my own understanding and what he was doing. And I want to break this down next week. He was breaking down Isaiah's warnings. And one of Isaiah's warnings was that we would fail. We would be blinded this time. The Constitution would hang by a thread, that we would be blinded. Right. So Isaiah's not really talking about the time the Constitution would hang by a thread. He's talking about prior to the Lord coming. We know that this is time because then we have Joseph and Brigham talking about that timing, that preparation, the things that would take place around the time the Constitution would hang from a thread, which is now, right? And that we know from our current leaders. However, what he said was that a couple of things. People would become blinded. We would become led by women and children, that the men would fail to be men. We'd lose masculinity, and that we would be blinded because people, the masses in the church, talking about the church now specifically, the saints, and they were specific on this because they wouldn't seek to understand for themselves. They wouldn't seek the knowledge to understand for themselves. And that's complacency. And that comes as part of the lulling lullaby that socialism sings. And they bring that in, and you lull into this whole idea that somebody else is going to do it for you. And before we get too far into this, we should probably watch and listen a little bit from a Latina, Gloria Alvarez, and from Guatemala, and listen to what she has to say about the Latin countries. And she's an expert in her field. And I'll put a link down below to her book as well. I don't know if it's in English. I think it's only in Spanish, unfortunately, but I'll put a link down there for those that speak Spanish. But any comments you got on this, Jeff, before we jump in this video? We're going to have to do some things where we take better control of that, Jeff, in the future. So we can jump back now to, it's going to be really hard to kind of run with this with Gloria, I'll be honest with you, because you need to see the video. I'll put the link to the video down below so our listeners can access the video and see it for themselves. Kind of want to walk through it and break it down. I think we need to do that next week as well, break that down. And go ahead, take it, Jeff. I'm a little disappointed we couldn't get that video up.
Yeah, it's okay. We want our viewers to kind of see what we're talking about. The whole socialist movement that we were kind of stuck in, it seems like, to me, that this wouldn't have gotten so popular in our own country. They should be able to look at the history in Latin America and realize that things aren't going well. We started out talking about tithing, and I see connections there at how to resolve poverty, and this is something that a lot of people might not understand. But my own poverty, my own personal situation, coming out of that, had to do with paying tithing. People are like, well, the church has got plenty of money. It's not about the church having money. Obviously it does, and obviously something is working. There's a bunch of jealous people out there that are upset that the church has, 200 billion or whatever, we've got. And if you look at other churches like the Catholic Church, it's significantly less than any other church. All the other bigger churches with a lot bigger population haven't performed that well. And that's the way I look at it, and they're like, well, it's a big corporation. I'm like, okay, whatever. So wouldn't the Savior Jesus Christ have control on being able to set up the church in a way to where it has resources? The church teaches us principles on how to live in life. And that's to live within our means and to pay our debts and to give and to be charitable. The church is very charitable. I think it's the most charitable organization in the world. They don't go around and pat themselves on the back. But when you look at Catholic Social Services, the church donates very much to them. The church has its own entities like Deseret Industries, the Bishop Warehouse, farms all over the U.S. And so this production of food and this charitable organization that allows, like the Humanitarian Center. When my wife came back with me to the United States, she didn't have a job. She didn't know how to speak the language. She went there to the Humanitarian Center. They build kits, for sending to Africa and other areas of the world that were impoverished, for school children. And they gave her a decent wage, and half of that time that they were paying her, she was having intense English, advanced English classes that they paid for. I think that there's a lot of people that don't really understand what the church does with its money, and they think that they're not being transparent. And it seems like I'm kind of going down this rabbit hole, but I'll bring it back. This whole anti-socialism thing or pro-socialism thing kind of boils down to us being able to be grateful for what we have in life. When we're not, we turn socialist. I think we look at the as a government, we look at as a society, we look at the other person that has more money than we do, and we're envious or we're upset, and we want to take that away and distribute that wealth the way it should be, appropriate it, right? But forcing that on people isn't the way it works. That was never God's way. And that's because, and we get that way as society because we become ungrateful for what we have. We say, hey, we need to have this and we're going to take it. And that's not the way. That's not the way that Jesus Christ taught us. He said, let Caesar, have what's his. So But we still have to pay our dues. Paying 10% is something that I will always pay now for the rest of my life. When I was disfellowshipped from the church many, many years ago, I couldn't pay tithing. And
I thank you for being with us on Courageous Conviction. Remember, there's 5 episodes each week that we put out. We have to go down a lot of rabbit holes, so stay with us. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and don't miss tomorrow's episode on Courageous Conviction.